What's going on, everyone? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today we're talking about the new Turtle Beach Atlas Air. Yes, not only is it an open back, but they brought the Atlas name back. If anyone remembers the Elite Atlas Aero from back in the day, that was a legendary headset. So this name means a lot, and I think that's why they were holding on to it for something like this. Now, Turtle Beach did send this to me for review along with all the other new headsets they recently announced. It won't affect what I say about it, but I always want to disclose that. Huge thanks to them. No monetary exchange or anything like that. In the links in the description below, if they are or become affiliate links, it's just generic links that I do for all of my stuff. It has nothing to do with Turtle Beach. Turtle Beach also launched the Stealth 600 Gen 3, which is a drastic departure from the older Gen 2. It's much improved in almost every way, so I'm really excited to talk about that. It required a lot of in-depth testing, so I want to cover that in greater detail to help you learn about what it can and can't do and fix any weird issues you may have. They also have the new Stealth 500. Both of these are pretty modestly priced. Both of them have Bluetooth support, neither being simultaneous, but I will be covering those later this week, so stay tuned on that. I just want to focus on this because there's a lot to unpack with the Air. So you may not know what an open back is or why that is a big deal. And I'm going to start with saying this: not everyone should have an open back headset. Now, open backs sound extremely natural because the idea of an open back is the cups behind the speaker, it's breathable in some way. It lets air flow through. A traditional gaming headset, like 99% of them out there, have a sealed cup behind the driver. And if you want to kind of mess with acoustics, cup your hands around your mouth and talk and see or hear how that impacts the sound. You have to deal with reflections and reverbs, but the one advantage of a closed back is you typically get stronger elevated bass response if you're craving more bass, and you also get what's called noise isolation, passive noise isolation. What that means is when you put a closed back on your head, it's going to block out more of your exterior noise. That includes things like fans from your PC, loud noises in the background, stuff that would otherwise interfere with what you're hearing. Now that works twofold. If you're playing something kind of loudly and you're in a quiet environment and you don't want to have other people hearing what you're playing, a closed back is going to help trap some of that noise in so they don't hear that. Now, an open back is the opposite, again, in both directions. If you're playing something loudly in a quiet environment, people are going to hear that. And if the environment is noisy, this isn't really going to block any of that either. So you might be asking, well, if there's not more bass and I have no noise isolation, why would I want an open back? And the answer really comes down to how natural sound can come across. If the characteristics of an open back suit you, one of the major advantages is because you're not dealing with reflections and echoes and all this other noise and behind the driver, things sound more natural. It sounds more spacious. It sounds more airy. When you listen to speakers, you have all the open air in the room. You're dealing with different types of reflections, but the general goal of this is if you listen to music, it is a much better, more rewarding listening experience typically. Now I say typically because headphones like the Odyssey Maxwell exist, which thanks to digital signal processing, which is audio correction, they were able to make a closed back planar magnetic headphone sound incredible. That headphone's over, it's $330, $300, depending on the model, so it's not in the same price bracket. Now where this becomes special is the open back being under $200. Again, this is $180. Now you're going toe to toe with something like the Drop PC38X or EPOS H6 Pro Open if you look at the wired side. And those sell for the same price as this. This has a kicker, and that is that it comes with a cable as well. So if you want to compare it directly to a Drop PC38X or H6 Pro, I will be doing that on the sound side, but this does function in the same way. This is a wireless powered headset, but it has a 3.5 millimeter connection on the bottom, so you can connect this to anything with an analog connection. That includes an Xbox controller, so something like the Stealth Pro from Turtle Beach has a headphone jack on the bottom and you can plug this headset into it. This is huge because if you want an open back headset for Xbox, well, your options are wired. This is another wired option. It's not like you're ruling this out just because it's designed to work on PC. Now, on the note of the transmitter and compatibility, the transmitter also works on PlayStation 5, so full wireless support. It sounds great on both PC and PlayStation. Now I do want to cover the sound for passive versus wireless real quick because I think this could affect people's purchase decision if you're also wanting this for Xbox. It passively tuned, which means just straight cable, sounds identical to the wireless configuration with signature sound enabled. They have the exact same sound profile, which means they tune this incredibly well out of the box. They didn't rely on digital signal processing to fix issues with the design. So just because you're considering this or may consider this for Xbox, you're not going to sacrifice the sound and be missing out on some of the capabilities this has. For what it comes with, it's pretty straightforward. You obviously get the headset, you get this nice braided analog cable, which doesn't really have any microphonics, which means if you're wearing it, you're not hearing the cable rub against your shirt. Really important if you're moving your head around. You also get this volume rocker here, which I honestly at first did not like the design. I thought it looked kind of funny, but this little thing sticking out actually makes it much easier for you to grab. It tends to lay in the right direction, so when you grab it like this, it's faster to find. Some other headsets that have more of an inline volume control, they're kind of a pain to use, and they stuck it on the cable because this has its own volume control on the left side of the headset itself. This giant wheel is the volume. Now this side does not spin because there is no game to chat mix on the Atlas Air. I don't know why. I'm a little disappointed, frankly, because at this price, to me, it's such an important feature that I rely on personally. When you connect it with analog, you can do game to chat mix on a controller like the Stealth Pro, or if you're using something like Sonar, you can always adjust that too. So there are ways to adjust it, and there's even a virtual driver from Turtle Beach if you're using the new Swarm software where you can assign your chat to virtual audio. You just can't adjust it with the headset itself. Now it also comes with a braided USB A to C cable for charging. You can charge it while you use it, but on the note of simultaneous stuff, you cannot use passive at the same time of wireless. I wish it had that because something like the Corsair Virtuoso XT, that supports simultaneous analog plus wireless. So that would have been a killer feature, especially for streamers. Unfortunately, you can't do that here. Now, it also lacks simultaneous Bluetooth, which is a little bit upsetting for me too. As a greedy person when it comes to features, I would have wished to be able to hear at least two options, some way to have two sources at once, whether it's the analog plus wireless, or in this case, Bluetooth plus wireless, so I can listen to stuff on my phone in between games and still hear my friends talking. It does have a quick switch function. There's a little button right here, right next to the aux input, which these buttons are all in the same general area, so you do have to get used to the placement. Otherwise, you might accidentally turn the headset off or switch inputs by accident, which will disconnect from your wireless. Now, it does support being connected to your phone via Bluetooth while you play wirelessly with the dongle, whether it's PC or Xbox. And if you get a phone call, you will hear a tone on the headset itself. Switching over will answer the call, and then you have a Bluetooth button as well, which also doubles as an action button. Some people like or dislike flip to mute. I personally like it a lot because it's fast. I have enough little buttons to worry about mispressing where I don't find it enough. And if I'm talking to my friends and this is positioned correctly and someone comes in the room, being able to quickly flip it up is really nice. Now, this is a longer boom. It's not as short as some of the other Turtle Beach headsets. So as you can tell, I kind of nicked my hat when I lifted it. If you want to mute it in the full upright position, you kind of want to bend it out a little bit. So then when you lower it, you have to angle it back in. It's a byproduct of having a longer boom mic, but the advantage of having that is that it's closer to your mouth, so you get more of a proximity effect, which makes the microphone sound a little bit better. Now, while I'm wearing it, I want to talk about comfort because it is ridiculous with this headset. It's one of its best features, not just the sound quality, it's comfort. For one, it's only 300 grams. That's incredibly light. It has a suspension strap with this interesting, like, stretchy nylon type material to it. You can adjust this strap. So it's going to be a little bit harder to see because we'll talk about the ear cups in a minute, but you can see this little Velcro strap here. Pulling this back to loosen it and then re-Velcro it, and if I could actually put it on straight, this is going to adjust how much tension you have here. Now that affects clamp force just slightly, but not by much, but the idea is to have it sit properly on your ear. It's weighted well, so you can kind of position it and it holds in place pretty easily. Now Turtle Beach got the memo when it came to clamp force. I will say this on the other reviews too, but the older Turtle Beach headsets were all notorious for a strong clamp. That is no longer the case, and the timing couldn't be better because I 3D printed a measuring system with a vertical scale accurate to 0.01 grams so I can measure the clamp force of every single headset I own. It's why I kept all of my headsets. I have about 100 now. And the advantage of this is I can show you numbers so you can see exactly where it falls. The database is kind of in alpha stage right now, but I promise that as it's ready for public, check in the description below. Depending on the timing of this all, that link will eventually show up and you can measure it. Otherwise, some graphics on the screen is going to help you compare. The clamp force is really light. The ear pads have not changed as far as being super plush. In fact, they switched to a full silk screen material, which means no more ear sweat. They stay super cool. The silk screen is one of my favorite materials on the ear because it's very smooth, it's very breathable, so sweat isn't going to be as much of an issue. Now, when you factor in lightweight, light clamp force, super compliant memory foam pads with a silkscreen material, these now become probably the best gaming headset for those who wear glasses. So even if you don't care about it being an open or closed back, wired, analog, whatever, if you're just sick of finding headsets that cause you ear fatigue because it's pressing on the temples of your glasses, this is the lightest clamp and most comfortable headset I've tried for glasses. That is absolutely huge. So I think that's honestly significant enough to consider. Now, another unique thing to the design is, one, I think and hope this headset lasts like forever. Like, it's built just stupidly well. When it comes to the build design, everything is extremely flexible and lightweight, but they have no hinge failure because there's no telescoping yoke, there's no single mounting point. Everything is this kind of robust build. Now, look at this design here. These are little rubber bungees. That's because the ear cup, look at how much movement it has. I'm going to try to stabilize this. Do you see how that's free floating? The entire cup is suspended from the chassis itself. This is good because how is that going to break? It's literally bungees. So all of that stress, if you pick it up wrong, if you're wearing it, it's going to help conform a little bit better to your ear. There's no swivel, but it's light. The clamp's not too bad, so I can still kind of wear it. It just doesn't lay as comfortably on my neck as some other headsets out there. But overall, they got the durability, they got the comfort, lightweight, and I think they really nailed the ergonomics side. One of the tests I like to do, I call the infamous toilet test, or at least I hope it becomes infamous one day. When we get a wireless headset, we're not constrained in one single spot. So if you need to leave the room to either relieve yourself, get some food, yell at the dog, whatever it is, you can now do that with a wireless headset. And some headsets work better than others when it comes to range. And they've all been greatly improving in this regard. So I can get over 50 feet through 2 walls with the Atlas Air. It doesn't go as far as the newer Nova 5X, which I got like 60 to 65 feet pretty consistently, but 50 feet plus is great. As far as same room wireless performance, I had no dropout issues whatsoever. It was rock solid, and it seems to work better than some of my older Turtle Beach wireless transmitters I have, so they've fixed some other issues in that side too. Battery life is rated at 50 hours, but frankly, I can't confirm that, and the reason being is my battery is like barely depleting. Now, I've been using this a lot, but the percentage is still higher than what would suggest 50 hours to be. So that leaves me with 2 conclusions. One, I'm either going to get more than 50 hours, like 60 to 70 hours, or the battery meter is not reading correctly and this is going to randomly die one day. I can't say that for sure, but when I do my long-term tests or my roundups comparing to others, I'll confirm that. I can't say I'm on the same charge since I got it. I've been using it for days, and it's still holding strong at over 50%, which is pretty awesome. Now, this is what the new microphone sounds like on the Atlas Air. This is more comparable to the new SteelSeries 5X microphone, which was an improvement over the older ones. I don't think this compares to the Razer Blackshark V2 Pro, the 2023 edition, or the less expensive Hyperspeed. I think it's a little bit worse than the Corsair HS80 Max as well, but this is still a good enough improvement, and you can EQ the microphone, which saves to the headset. So once you set this up with Swarm 2 software, you can save your profile, make sure you're happy with it, and then if you're playing on PlayStation, benefit from those changes. Now, there's a couple things I want to talk about with the mic. It has side tone, which is the ability to hear yourself. If side tone is enabled, it has no hiss, which is a huge win. A lot of headsets, once you enable side tone, there's white noise or a low hiss, and that's not the case here, which is great. Side tone on this model is not as loud as some other models with side tone when you max it out. Part of that is because this is an open back, it doesn't have to be as loud. Think of it more of being like a little bit of a filler to the environment noise. I can hear myself crystal clear when I'm wearing this. So the side tone being on is just to kind of help combat with game noise if you're in a loud environment. Now, while I talk to you, I have noise gate turned on, but noise gate is set to only 5%. It honestly works really well at a very low percentage. You can turn the noise gate off if you're a soft spoken person, because unlike some other headsets out there that have, I think, a little bit better algorithm for blocking out background noise, 5 to 10 is ideal because it gets rid of keyboard noise or at least greatly reduces it. This is the older Drunk Deer keyboard, which is a little bit noisier. So I'm going to type now with noise gate at 5%, and that's what it sounds like. So I'm going to turn the noise gate off now, and you can hear there's more background noise. Now, if I turn noise gate on, and it's back on right now, and I set the noise gate up really high, it clips out my voice even if I'm loud spoken. So I'm going to switch it to about 75, 80, 81.
This is what my voice sounds like at 81, and if I max it out, now I'm really dealing with noise gate issues because it seems to just be way too aggressive, and it also makes my voice far too quiet. So I'm back down to noise gate 5, which I think is a happy medium of most of the background noise rejection I want, but it still lets me sound rather clear. And then if I go to the microphone settings, which I can click the little EQ button on the left here, then click the microphone tab, you have these default profiles. Now, full is my favorite, so let's switch to that. And this is what I sound like talking with the full preset on. I hear a little double tone in here telling me I'm on profile 2, switching over to clarity. Now this is what my voice sounds like with the clarity preset, which is going to be bright with less bass. Smooth is going to scoop out some of the mids, but still elevate the treble a little bit, which is not too complimentary for my particular voice. So you'd want to experiment with it. So I'm going to switch back to full now. And this is the setting I prefer to stay with.
So we're going to talk about sound quality and start with the objective side, which is all based on measurements. It takes my opinion out of it, and it helps you know exactly what this sounds like without me just trying to speculate or use, nice, sweet sounding words to describe sound. Words that you could use to describe wine or food. So the Atlas Air, it measures really well. So let's start with that. And I'm going to leave some other measurements on the screen here, which is the Odyssey Maxwell and the Drop PC38X, arguably the most desired and unanimously agreed upon audio tune for gaming headsets, period. They sound absolutely fantastic for gaming. The pink line being the Drop PC38X, the green line being the Odyssey Maxwell, and then the blue line being the Atlas Air. This is arguably a very close sounding tune, and it sounds that way to the ear. So I want to explain this a little bit. On the left side of the chart here, above where you see 30, 50, and 80, these are your bass frequencies, lower frequencies, and if that's higher, your bass is going to be more prominent, deeper, impactful. Now, if you go too high, it can muddy up the sound and it drowns out everything else. So you always want to find a balance. And when you consider how well regarded the Drop PC38X is, and then how well regarded the Maxwell is, having the Atlas Air sit right in the middle of that is a pretty awesome bass profile. Now, the mids, arguably, when you look at 800 hertz, 500 hertz, they're scooped just slightly, meaning that vocals might sound slightly further back than something like the Drop or the Maxwell, but you're only talking 2 to 3 decibels here. It's extremely minor. Most people won't notice that, and this will still sound very natural. What makes the Atlas Aero sound a little bit different than the other two is it's a little bit more forward in the treble region. So think of this as slightly warm but neutral bass and a little bit brighter treble presentation. For music, it's still not overdone. My biggest pick here, or nitpick here, is in the 8,000 hertz area, or 8K. It's just a little bit sparkly, and it can be sibilant. It just depends. It doesn't sound as sibilant on a lot of things I listen to and play. It's only a few tracks that are exposed on it. Now, I talked about how the analog cable sounds almost identical. So let's hide the Drop and the Maxwell, and you can see it's almost identical. So the big kicker here is when you're on signature sound with the Atlas Air, it's the same exact thing as just passive on a wire. So Xbox players, anything with analog, you can still benefit from the sound profile out of the box, which is awesome. If you look closely, you'll see that the driver matching is quite nice as well. There's a little bit of a shift right about 2000 hertz, but it's only by a few decibels. It wasn't enough to be game breaking for me on the game. It still sounded pretty natural, so that's how it measures. As far as gaming performance goes, it's kind of a mixed bag, and this really comes down to the form factor. It's an open back. Now, on the sound profile, the detail and clarity and naturalness, it's incredible. It really does do a great job, and it presents everything the way it should sound without having any weird things going on. The 8 kilohertz peak that I pointed out is the only real flaw I had, but it's a lot less noticeable in gaming. It's more of a music thing for me. So let's start with first-person shooters. Being an open back, because it doesn't block out a lot of background noise, if you have a very noisy fan on your computer or other noise to deal with, and competitive FPS is your primary thing, you really don't want an open back headset in general. That's what things like the Stealth Pro are for, or the less expensive Stealth 600 Gen 3, or even the 700, the older one. Those block out more exterior noise, and that is going to give you an advantage in a noisier environment. So assuming your environment is quieter, this sound profile is fantastic. The bass isn't overpowering. It's not muddy at all. It's extremely clean, and that slight forwardness in the 2000, 3000 hertz area is actually ideal for FPS. It really helps footsteps stand out. Now, if you want to custom EQ it, this is where things get a little weird. The signature sound or analog sounds great. There is an issue to me with this headset where the volume gain isn't as ideal as I would have preferred. It is very finicky to adjust volume, and I think most people are going to always be at 70 to 100. This headset doesn't go as loud as I would have hoped, at least out of the box. So when you turn it up, naturally you have less of a window to operate, whereas I feel like it should have stepped more aggressively at lower volumes so you don't feel like you're always maxing it out. Now, I provided a lot of testing and feedback information to Turtle Beach with hopes of seeing that maybe a future firmware update will address a couple of these things, because I found out that sadly, if you do any form of custom EQ or choose any of the built-in profiles that is not signature sound, that effectively starts applying EQ. And when you do that, if you have the volume at a lower volume, you hear this like thumping, scratchy sound, almost like you're hearing the compression or artifacts of lower noises selectively being picked up or cut. It's like just this thumping, wispy type sound. And it's even, just to give you an example, if I have this volume set to, let's say, 70 or 80, I'm in Call of Duty and all I'm doing is navigating through the menus at a slightly lower volume, that produces that issue. And it's super distracting. And this pulsing low frequency actually caused some ear fatigue for me. It was kind of uncomfortable. So EQ is going to be a solution to an extent, but that is an issue right now that currently I can replicate over and over, and I haven't found a fix aside from not doing any EQ. Now, if you do like louder volumes and you want to embrace EQ to still tune it a little bit, I have the EQ profile that I'm showing that boosts the volume significantly. This drastically makes the headset louder, especially at medium volumes, so to me it's much more usable. I also take care of some of the mid-range tuning and reduce that 8K spike a little bit. To me, if this didn't have any of that artifact issues or choppiness at very, very low volumes, this would be all I would need. And if you listen to louder, try this anyway, because especially with music at higher volumes, it sounds absolutely insane, and I really like it. I did do a minor change for FPS EQ where I reduced some of the bass, boosted 125 hertz, and scooped the upper bass to kind of clean that up. Otherwise, the rest of the tuning is identical. Normally, I would adjust the 32 hertz band more, but it doesn't really do anything right now. When I was first adjusting it, I noticed the sound didn't change the way I expected, so I put it on my measuring rig, and I was like, holy cow, it does not behave correctly. If you reduce the bass at 32 hertz, it actually reduces it at 60 hertz. And if you increase the bass, it increases it at 50 hertz instead, and it does it less so than what your adjustment is. So the 32 hertz band is kind of messed up right now. I wouldn't even touch it unless you want that byproduct, I guess. I provided this feedback to them as well. Now, I did test every other band, all the way max and min, just to make sure everything else was working correctly before I sent my findings over, and I confirmed everything else looks good there. So getting back to the subjective side, when you're playing games like this, the naturalness and the comfort is fantastic. If you don't need a lot of bass, frankly, this sound profile works for everything. The open back has a really natural wide sound stage. Everything feels vast without being too much in a particular area when it comes to gaming. You can add bass, and it does handle bass rather well. Again, doing with the artifact issue I was talking about earlier, but it can be customized. In fact, I feel like when you compare it to even the drop PC38X in gaming, this goes toe to toe, no problem whatsoever. So when you think about the fact that it's the same price, but it's much more comfortable than a drop PC38X, and I have the benefit of going wireless, that's a pretty commendable thing on the sound side. Now, where an open back really shines and where it's more noticeable is in music production. They sound more natural to me, and that was no exception here. This easily destroys most gaming headsets on the music side, and will keep up with, again, the drop, the Maxwell, those types of headphones. It sounds very, very natural, and it works really well on music, vocals, and acoustics. If you're craving really deep, pounding bass, you listen to a lot of trap, EDM, and hip hop, and you like to boost the bass a lot, this still handles a surprising amount of bass really well. Just don't expect that super low frequency bass to be very strong. Open backs just simply don't have the ability to do that because you have this, open air. There's nothing keeping the driver from overextending itself once you get to a certain audible threshold. So that would probably be the only genres I'd be more wary of if you're chasing a headset that does everything, and that's something you like to listen to. Now, during the mic portion, you got a little taste of Swarm 2, which is Turtle Beach's latest software. It replaced the older Swarm and Neon software. Both had their own kind of bugs between Turtle Beach and Rockcat programs. So this is a step in the right direction. Now, it looks significantly better and works better, but I did have some initial bugs with firmware updates or getting the headset to be detected. It either required removing the headset and reinstalling it. I couldn't auto update Swarm 2 because I've had this for several days. A new version came out 2 days ago. It failed to update properly, so I had to uninstall it, download the newest version manually, and then that started fixing things. Now, ironically, the change notes in the newest version says fixed the auto update not working properly. So I'm assuming going forward, this is no longer going to be an issue, but I did want to share that. As far as the configuration goes, there are a few things you have to set up, in my opinion, with this headset. Now, one of them is to disable Waves 3D. And by doing that, you reduce the chance of some bugs happening. It's more prominent on the Stealth 600 Gen 3. This one didn't have the same issues with volume reduction, at least as much. So in my opinion, if you go to your sound settings, just disable all audio enhancement in Windows, and that made that work better. Now, it does bypass Waves 3D, which I actually thought made footsteps sound very loud and forward, which was kind of cool. So you can always experiment with it, but I was still fine with it being off and then not dealing with any issues that brought. So experiment with that. With the rest of the software, as you adjust the headset and change the volume, you're going to see the volume go up and down on the program itself. You also get the ability to turn on Superhuman Hearing, which has different modes. So you have Legacy, Footsteps, and Gunshots. I didn't like the Gunshots one as much, but Legacy and Footsteps was great. And even if you set it to a lower volume like 40, it's mild enough where it still helps with some footsteps tracking because it cleans up the bass mix a little bit, but it's not so much that it's like ruining the sound and making it sound unnatural. Obviously, you have your microphone settings on the side here. Monitoring, you can toggle on and off, and then you can adjust the noise gate I was talking about earlier. Now, you can either scroll up and down to mess around with your EQ or microphone settings, or you can click these buttons on the left, which are kind of like a quick scroll. This computer doesn't have my custom EQs, but obviously you saw the pictures, so I just wanted to show you how you can navigate through it. It's very easy to create new ones. If you start, messing around with stuff, now I can hit save as new preset and I'm good to go. Otherwise, we're going to just reset this and go back. Then you have the additional settings specific to the headset you have plugged in, which is going to show you the battery life, the status, auto power off, which I have set for 30 minutes and that's worked great, and then how loud the tones are. When you do turn this on, that initial tone from booting up is a little bit loud, so you might want to turn that off in case you ever like to power it on while wearing it. The rest of the stuff is either tied to macros, which is more relevant for keyboards, or settings for the app itself, and this is where you do all your updates. Now with Quick Switch, you can use the mobile app as well, which is also called Swarm 2, and it's available on Apple or Android devices. It works really well, but the features are a little bit lacking. So if you're on the sound setting, you can see that you can adjust your volume or the gain presets. So even if you design and create your own custom EQs on PC, like I said, it does save to the headset, but those profiles will not show up on the mobile app. So if you do create your own EQ, then you open the mobile app, it will overwrite your existing EQ that came from PC. So keep that in mind, otherwise it might mess up some of your settings, and you won't know that until it just sounds different. Then you go back to your PC and you have to switch two profiles, back to a stock, back to your custom one to get that sound profile back. You also don't have the ability to customize some of the settings on the headset as far as the audio side goes, but again, that's specific to the PC. On the microphone side, you can adjust your mute, because even though it's a flip to mute, while the mic is down, you can still mute it on the app. You do have the ability to adjust mic sensitivity, noise gate, and the monitoring volume to hear yourself speak. Again, the microphone has to be on for this to turn on, and now that I did, here it is lit up. And then on the equalizer stuff, it at least does show my selection there, which is great, so I'm going to preserve that. If I go into the settings here, this is the tones, and then transmitter is just showing you how bright the LED is. So on the transmitter itself, if you're muted, the LED is red, for example, and you can turn that brightness down. The rest of it is, again, just going to show you stuff settings for the app, just like the Swarm 2 software on PC. So you can do some of these settings through mobile, but you have to first switch to Bluetooth mode in order to set this all up. After that, toggle back to your wireless connection, and then you can start gaming. Now, the Atlas Air was a lot to unpack, and you can kind of see as this video unfolded how much there really was to cover here. It supports things like Dolby Atmos on PC. You could get Game to Chat Mix on PC if you're using another program to help mix it for you, but there's no native controls on it. Again, it does not have simultaneous Bluetooth, and it does not merge passive with the wireless connection. However, the good news is on passive, it works on anything including Xbox. It's extremely easy to drive. It seems to be 32 ohms based off my measurements with an ohm meter, but I'm waiting on confirmation from that. So you don't need an amp to get the most out of this. Plug it into anything. Even a $10 Apple dongle will do just fine. and it'll work really well. Now, they nailed the comfort. They nailed the clamp force. I did mean to mention this earlier. When you have a really light clamp force like this, depending on your head size, it's not really going to do it with a hat on right now. But if you look up and down, some people, the headphone or headset will slide around a little bit. It's not as secure. It's something like the Stealth Pro, which has a much stronger clamp. It's going to be less comfortable over a long period of time, but it'll be very secure and it won't move around much when you do. So yeah, even though it's lacking some features I think some people are looking for, the biggest issue right now that I just wanted to warn everyone about is it doesn't get as loud as I would have hoped, and you have these weird issues with EQ. If they solve those two things, it is an absolute knockout. I think it goes toe-to-toe on sound quality, pure sound quality, with some of the best on the market, period. And I own them all. I've used them extensively, and I kept being surprised by how well they pulled off an excellent sound profile. So Turtle Beach is really onto something. If you're happy with the way it is now and you don't care about those possible changes, it's definitely a recommend. If you're really apprehensive on those things getting fixed or not, then it's kind of up to you. I really wish I didn't have to deal with it because some of those custom EQ issues are very distracting for me. So that needs to be fixed for me to give it a 100% recommendation. So thank you so much for watching this. I know it was a lot to unpack. Shoot me a comment below. Otherwise, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We're really trying to grow the channel this year, on the road to 100K, but I can't thank you all enough for the support. So with that being said, I'll see you at the next one. Bye.